This is Math 03 Module 1 Review number 27. The instructions say solve the inequality, give the solution set in both interval notation and graph form. So I have negative 3 over 4x is greater than or equal to negative 9. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of that denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. I could multiply by negative 4 over 3 all in one step. Now I have negative 3x is greater than or equal to negative 36. And now I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. Remember, the rule is when you divide across the inequality by a negative, you change the direction of the inequality sign. So I have x is less than or equal to positive 12. I go to graph that, and if 12 is here, then I'm going to, because my variable is on the left, I'm pointing in that direction, so my graph goes in that direction. Darken in the arrow at the end to indicate that you know that the graph goes infinitely in the left-hand direction. And then I have to decide whether at 12 I want a parentheses or a bracket. Because it's less than or equal to, that means I need a bracket opening in the same direction that my inequality sign pointed. So there's your graph, and now I need to do interval notation. Remember, interval notation always tells you where it starts on the left and where it ends on the right, reading it in the same way you read a page in a book from left to right. Well, since this indicates that my inequality is going infinitely in that direction, that means my starting point is negative infinity and my ending point is 12. I have a parenthesis next to negative infinity because, of course, infinity doesn't have an endpoint, so I can't include an endpoint if there isn't one. And the endpoint at 12 is included because of the less than or equal to, so that's a bracket on the right-hand side. Number 39 is the inequality 5 times the quantity 3 minus x is less than or equal to 3 times the quantity x minus 3. So on both sides I'm going to use my distributive property. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times negative x is minus 5x is less than or equal to 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times negative 3 is minus 9. Now on both sides I don't have any terms that can be combined, so I'm going to move my 3x from the right to the left. Of course, you can move in the other direction as long as you change it at the last step. Cancels over here, and I have 15 minus 8x is less than or equal to negative 9. Now I'm still moving away from my x, so I'm going to subtract 15 over to the right-hand side. And I have negative 8x is less than or equal to negative 24. And at the last step, I'm going to divide by negative 8. And x, again, I divided by a negative, so I change the direction of my inequality, and x is greater than 3. Here is 3 on my number line. X is greater than or equal to 3. Remember, my inequality is pointing to the right, so my graph goes to the right. Darken in the arrow at the end so I know that you meant to go to infinity in that direction. And now I have to decide whether I need a parenthesis or a bracket at 3. And of course it's a bracket because it's greater than or equal to, not just greater than. And it opens in that direction. Okay, for my interval notation, remember we're looking at where does it start at the left and end at the right. Well, it starts at the number 3, and it goes infinitely in the right-hand direction, which means it goes to infinity. Remember, infinity never has a bracket next to it because it doesn't have an endpoint. 3 has a bracket next to it because that endpoint is included, and I already decided that when I put the bracket on my graph. Number 41 says 63 is less than 7a. This is a pretty simple one. I divide both sides by 7. And 7 goes into 63 9 times, so I have 9 is less than a. But remember, if you want to use the direction of your inequality as an indicator for how to graph it, your variable has to be on the left, so I'm just going to turn it around to a is greater than 9. That doesn't change the value. That's not the same kind of change the direction of your inequality that dividing or multiplying by a negative is, because in this one, my inequality is pointing at 9, meaning a is bigger than that, and in this one, it's still pointing at 9. That's not an equal sign under there. I'm just talking about what direction it is. So I haven't changed the direction. I simply turned it around. Here's 9. If A is greater than that, it's pointing to the right, so my line or my graph goes to the right. I darken in the arrow at the end, and now I need to decide whether I use a bracket or a parentheses. Of course it's a parentheses because that endpoint was not included. So my interval notation starts at 9 and goes to infinity, because remember, you read it left to right on your graph, parentheses at both ends because neither endpoint is included. Number 43 is a compound inequality because there are two inequality signs, so I have to move everything in the middle near the x out to the two out-hand sides. So first thing I'm going to do is subtract 3, and I subtract it from all three sides or all three places. I have negative 3 now is less than or equal to, that cancels. I have negative 2x is less than 7. Now inside I have negative 2 multiplied by x, so I have to divide by negative 2. And now, because I divided by a negative, I change the direction of my inequalities, and I have 3 over 2 is greater than x, which is greater than negative 7 over 2. Remember, when I drew my graphing, I like to move from least to greatest, so I'm going to turn my compound inequality around, and I have negative 7 over 2 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 3 over 2. Littlest to biggest. Negative 7 over 2 is littler than 3 over 2, and that's what I'm saying. Negative 7 over 2 is less than x, which is less than 3 over 2. I've written it from least to greatest. And remember, when it's written as a compound inequality with your variable in the middle, that means x falls between negative 7 over 2 and positive 3 over 2. So when I go to graph that, here's negative 7 over 2. Here's 3 over 2, and it's everything in between those. Okay, and now I have to decide parentheses or brackets. Negative 7 over 2 is less than x but not equal to, so I have a parenthesis there. It's less than or equal to 3 over 2, so on that side, whoops, I have a bracket. And when I go to write my interval notation, it looks basically like what I graphed on the number line. My starting point is negative 7 over 2. My ending point is 3 over 2. Negative 7 over 2 was not included, so I have a parenthesis next to it. 3 over 2 was included, so I have a bracket next to it. And there's my interval notation.